On today's Radisode.
Did I just make my Santa Cruz Tallboy even better? Hello, people of Earth. Welcome to another Pedaling with Poonces. I'm going to blow your mind with some statistics. Let me show you something. I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not really. We are going to delve into some results-driven information. Unbelievable. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, did I just make my Santa Cruz Tallboy the mostest, bestest all-around bike even better? Let's find out. Many of you may have watched a video I did before on the Cascade Link. So the Cascade Components Link that I added to my bike. Make sure you check that out. I'll link it at the end of this video. I got it for Christmas from my lovely wife, and we decided to, we as in me and my biking buddies, decided to install it.
Look, I'm doing stuff.
Woohoo! And see how it ran. How does my Tallboy react to having the Cascade Link? Now the Cascade Components Link basically does more or less two things. One is it increases the rear suspension, the travel on your rear suspension from 120 to 128 on the Santa Cruz Tallboy. It'll change the amount differently on different bikes, but on the Tallboy, that's what it does. And then it also helps to ramp up the progression. So when you're jumping or you're lifting off of a drop or a jump or something, it'll ramp up your rear suspension so it will react better to the jumps, is my understanding. I don't understand how all of that works. Jack squat! But that's my understanding of it. In essence, all the research I did on adding a Cascade Components Link to a Tallboy or almost any other bike is that it should help the bike respond a little bit better downhill. Maybe give you some more confidence downhill because it does increase your suspension, your amount of travel, and it does ramp up the progression on jumps and things.
Oh yeah, that was nice. That felt good.
What's next? What's next? What's next?
The downside is that it also, I read that it will impact your climbing a little bit. So I wanted to find out what happens. Let's look at this from a results-based way to compare. Because I know how I feel about the Cascade Components Link, and how I feel about it is it does give me more confidence on the downhill. I've been hitting jumps that I never used to hit, or I hit jumps that I used to hit very tentatively.
Just a little chicken. Chip, 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 chip.
Now I hit with more confidence, with more speed.
Yeah.
I felt overall that my biking, descending in particular, or anytime I got into a little bit of chunky stuff, that the bike seemed to handle it better. I felt more, a little more supple and also grounded in it with the Cascade Link. But that's just feeling, you know? We're not here to talk about just our feelings, are we? No, we are not. Damn! So we're gonna dive into some actual statistics. I want to look at this as to, okay, fine, I feel better riding the bike. I have more confidence. I'm hitting better jumps. So all of that's very subjective. And I can tell you unequivocally that I noticed that. I did notice on the downside that going uphill, I didn't feel quite as fast.
You're fat.
And I thought, well, let's look at this. Let's figure out a way to test this without just doing timed rides. I mean, yeah, you can do that by all means. But I wanted to do something that was less purposeful, right? So if you're doing a set time before and after, pre and post install of the Cascade Link, that's all fine, but it's going to be very intentional. I thought, let's look at a wider array of rides that I've done and looked at the statistics. So what I used was Strava.
Murder him!
So love it or hate it. I know some people just think it's awful. I personally love using Strava. I don't love everything about Strava. I have some big complaints about it, but I do love that it shows me how I'm progressing on trails overall and on certain segments, how I'm comparing with my riding buddies.
You know, you just showed up like, please, I'm helping you out. No, you're not.
It gives me a sense of how am I doing over a period of time as I ride a trail and become more familiar or an area. but also how I'm doing compared to people that I like to ride with. But for this, I thought it would really work well to figure out what does the Cascade Link do for, in this case, the Tallboy. Did I make the Tallboy the even more all-around best mountain bike out there? And I know you're gonna come at me once we go through these results. So let's have a look. First things first, what is the criteria? How did I judge pre and post Cascade Link? So I'll put it on the screen. You may or may not be able to see it very well. I've zoomed in. So what we did is I looked at 10 rides pre and post install of the Cascade Link. I excluded any group rides. So anytime I had 4 or more riders, I excluded that as a ride, because with group rides, you're going to be stopping more, you're chatting, you're doing all these things. You're probably not getting a bunch of PRs when you're riding in a big group. But it was on the majority rides were solo. I excluded the first 2 rides once right after the install because it was going to take me a little bit of time to adjust the sag and readjust the suspension and just get a feel for the new Cascade Link and how it makes the bike feel. So I excluded the first 2 rides just to give me a little breaking in period. I didn't look at any paved road segments or anything that was just like very basic riding, like gravel roads or paved roads. Cascade Link is for single track, riding hard, if you will. Then I also looked at that it was a minimum of 2% grade up or down. So elevation or de-elevation, if that's a word. I think it is. I just made it up if it isn't. And so it had to be 2%. And the reason I used 2% was because it will allow you to, and this is the average across the Strava segment. So it's not the whole thing is exactly 2% grade. It might be 5%, 3%, 1%, 0%, 3%, but the average elevation increased or decreased was 2%. Oh, and also threw this one in, I can't be sick or first or second recovery ride. So there's a couple rides I did pre or post, I can't remember, where I'd had a cold or the flu or something like that. I wasn't feeling very good for a couple of weeks. And I thought, well, I'm not going to use that because it was again, trying to get just back into it. So I negated those. Ultimately, the rides were all very similar. It was all kind of the similar types of terrain here in Las Vegas. Several of the rides were very, like I say, the actual loops that I did were very similar, but it really kind of leveled it all the way across. Now, here's where it gets interesting.
Onwards and upwards.
So pre-Cascade Link install, you can see the dates here. These are the number, that's the number on the ride. So there's 1, 2, yeah. So there's 8 pre that I was solo and 7 post. But I got a total of 7 PRs, so that's personal records on Strava, so your best time ever. I got 7 on just a variety of these different trails that met this criteria. I got 7 going uphill, so 2% or more grade, and I got 9 going downhill before. So a total of 16 personal records, personal bests on these 10 rides that I chose. And that represented 43.8% of these 16 were going uphill. So pretty even. And then again, this is why I've said the Tallboy is such a great all-around bike, because I, like you and me in particular, I get PRs pretty evenly going up or going down on the Tallboy. This is where it gets interesting. Wait for it. So this is post adding the link. These are the dates. 4 uphill. So I went from 7 to 4 uphill. Going downhill, I went from 9 PRs before to 20. After the Cascade Link install. So a huge difference, not only in terms of I dropped some uphill PRs. I went from 7 to 4 across the 10 rides. But I went from 9 to 20 PRs on the downhill pre and post Cascade. And then overall, I went from 16 to 24 PRs that were at least on a 2% up or 2% down grade. That's a 50% increase, 50% more PRs total after I added the link. Now, the downside is that I had 30% less PRs going uphill. So I went from, like I say, 7 to 4. So I had 3 less basically over those 10 rides. But I went from 9 to 20. So clearly there's a huge advantage, if you will, to helping my downhill riding on my Tallboy.
Well, those both felt good.
Wow. I mean, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will. But it's very results based. And I wasn't thinking about this at all when I was riding. And that's why I wanted to do 10 rides pre and 10 rides post. I didn't want to do just time trials because it kind of can mess with you a little bit versus just taking a wide sample of rides pre and post. I never planned this. I thought about this afterwards. I thought, what would be a great way to compare before and after and just make sure that the rides are fairly similar. And that's why I said I kind of used this criteria. Another thing that I wanted to show was, so again, I went from 16 to 24 PRs. Again, most of those were downhill PRs, which was great because I'm not as strong a downhill rider as I am an uphill rider. I tend to get more PRs going uphill than I do downhill. And especially comparing myself with my riding buddies, I tend to be near the top for climbing segments, but near the bottom of downhill segments with my buddies, which again is why I wanted to get the Cascade components, because it's helped my confidence and it's clearly helped my times, my speed going downhill. And then also even just looked at like the average speed. So the average miles per hour on these 10 rides before. Now this is an average of an average. So you really, in statistics, you shouldn't look at it that way.
How dare you? But
I thought, let's just have a peek. So across the 10 rides before, this is them in average speed, 6.1, 2, 4, all the way up to 9.4. And this was a 7.48 miles per hour before the Cascade Link average, or 7.3 median. So median is the two middle numbers basically, and it's average of the two middle speeds, if you will. Post, I went from 7.48 to 7.71. So again, I increased the average speed. So the median went from 7.3 to 7.65 miles per hour. This is where it gets fun. Tell me what you think. Do you think I made my bike better by getting that many more PRs on the downhill, but then my uphills have kind of suffered a little bit? Does that make it a better bike or maybe a worse bike? What I would love, so please comment below and please like and subscribe if you haven't. Join in on the conversation. What I would love to see is for any of you, if you've added the Cascade Link to your bike and what were the results for you? How did it feel? And let's get into it. Is my Tallboy an even better all-arounder? I think it is. Come at me. Until next time, peace.
Does anybody want to come for a tuna casserole?
Yeah! Woohoo! The new way to shred.